This time on Whatever We Want, we talk about
every single animated Disney movie. We are going through every era of Disney animation and determining what the best time for Disney movies was, or is it yet to come? There are time codes down in the description. If you like to jump around to different points in the episode, we talk everything from Frozen 2 to World War II. Enjoy! Welcome back to Whatever You Want. We review content across all means of media, movies, TV shows, video games, and beyond to give you the most interesting behind-the-scenes insight, storytelling techniques, all that jazz, and more.
We go over everything from Disney, Marvel, DC. So without further ado, let's jump right into it.
You ready to talk about some Disney animated movies?
Yeah.
Again? Seems like we're doing that a lot. This is a little weird because we're recording this like a little out of order because I'm trying to get ahead for when one of my friends comes to town. So we're recording this right after our last like animation episode, but this will be coming out like a little later just because I wanted to like space it out, you know?
Yeah.
So today we are talking about, like we said in the intro, every single animated Disney movie ever. So I've been on like a Disney animation history kick where I've been just researching a lot about like the different eras of Disney, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Disney, like film historians, like, which sounds lame, but it's not, trust me, at least to me. But maybe it's lame to everyone else. But film historians like break Disney into like different eras of like movies, I think it's pretty cool to see, and like it totally makes sense like how they're split up. So I just want to like run through all of this and kind of give like a brief history on the different eras of Disney animation, because it's interesting because it definitely informs in like how it led to each era and like what it led to today. And I want to talk about like rank the eras, like what we think the best era was. Has Disney peaked? Does it have the potential to rise again? Talk about all that stuff. Just debate it. I like talking about animation and that stuff. So
yeah.
And I know you're animation as well.
Yeah. It's funny
to
talk about this actually because, like you said, you've been going like deep into Disney, but like I've been thinking about it more recently. I'm surprised you didn't get into animation yourself, like doing like animation work specifically.
That was one of the things I have considered that, and honestly, I think all of this, not all of this, but a lot of it. I think a lot of things have been coming together to get me interested in animation again, like Puss in Boots, and then like the whole corridor, like anime rock, paper, scissors, and just their whole show Animators React. Like actually, I think there's probably documents somewhere, but like years ago when I was deciding, like people were asking me like, what do you want to do in film? I didn't really want to like lock myself down. I wasn't sure. I always said like either VFX, editing, or animation. Those were like the three that I was like, I could see myself doing something in here. And I applied to like a few Pixar jobs, I think, but I just ended up in VFX for now. Like I never know. You never know what's going to happen down the road. I don't want to lock myself in. I want to be like a jack of all trades, but also somewhat specialized, you know? So like figuring it out, which is why we're talking about animation. So yeah, I don't know if this would be interesting. I think it's also interesting because some of this Disney lore, as I'm going to call it, ties into like DreamWorks and spawning some of the other things. And I'm listening to like this crazy audiobook. It's like a 25-hour audiobook called Disney Wars. And it's about the Michael Eisner regime and how he came in and revitalized animation. Then there was a falling out with him and another executive, Katzenberg, who then branched off and formed DreamWorks. And we've talked about that a little bit. But so we're going to talk about a little bit about that. But I just want to go through each like era and kind of determine like, talk about the movies from each period. So you ready to jump into the first era of Disney animation ever?
Take me back, Jake. So warping sound effect.
We're going back. It's the 1930s, the Great Depression. Woo! Great times. I'm just kidding. It's not great times. But so yeah, Disney like was founded. I think Walt Disney and his brother like Roy O. Disney, I believe was his name, founded like the Disney Studios in the late 1920s. I think it was like 1929 or something like that. They formed Disney, and then they actually created like a character called Oswald. Oswald, who was like not like Mickey Mouse, but I think he was like a bunny, Oswald the rabbit or something like that. Yeah. And that was like gonna be like Mickey Mouse of the Disney Animation Studios, but I think it was just getting started and didn't know any better. So the person he made the deal with to create Oswald like had some legal loopholes that basically meant Walt Disney signed away the rights to Oswald to this other guy, and he wouldn't give the rights back, so Disney couldn't use Oswald in any future animations, even though they had kind of started making a name for themselves with Oswald. So they're like, oh, that kind of sucks. So then they created Mickey Mouse to like do something completely different, and that stuck. And actually pretty recently, I think Bob Iger was the one who finally got the rights to Oswald back, like within the past 20 years.
Yeah, no, they got the rights back a while ago, because I remember there was a game that came out. It was like it's like on Wii or something like that.
But I think that's crazy. It took almost 100 years. It took like I think like 80 years.
He's the Avatar.
The rights back.
Oswald is the Avatar.
And when the world needed him most, he vanished, and then he returned. Bob Iger is Sokka, confirmed.
Oh man, that's funny.
But yeah, so that was like the 20s, and I think Disney did a lot of like just commercial work and just creating little shorts and animations, because there was no feature length film animation until almost 10 years later. After Disney was founded, they created Snow White, and that is the first film in 1937 that starts the mark of what they call the Golden Age, and that goes from 1937 to 1947. And that includes, and I think this is a golden age. It's a good age. So that includes Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, the first one, not Fantasia 2000, Dumbo, and Bambi. So that's the lineup for the golden age. I didn't realize Pinocchio was the second Disney film ever until pretty recently.
Yeah, no, it kind of, it's funny because like it almost seems like it'd be like just pre-Renaissance.
It feels like, it feels like, I feel like it's like a timeless classic so much that like it feels like they spent a lot of time refining their craft and they landed on this because it's so good. So I think that's a testament to how good Pinocchio was, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think about these films in the golden age?
I mean, they're classics for a reason. I mean, they were innovative in the way that the animation was done at the time, but obviously there's still a lot of room for things to grow, and I feel like they realized that as they started getting to like the later stories, because there's things just creatively and artistically that they wanted to do, but things were pulling them back. Yeah, which I believe will probably take you to your next transition, I guess.
My next transition. Well, yeah. So I mean, the golden age, I think, was a good time because there's a lot of creatives and artists, and they just kind of do whatever they wanted. Like the Great Depression. When did the Great Depression end? I guess it was kind of World War II. Depression.
Yeah, pretty much.
That kind of that's the war was what got people out of the Great Depression was like 1939. Yeah, or like I guess ending during World War II, 1941. Well, that kind of marks the next period of Disney, which was 1943 to 1949, which is actually historians call it the Wartime Era.
Yeah, dude, there is some crazy stuff from Disney in there.
Yeah, well, basically what I'm sure you know, but like what happened, I didn't really know this until, again, recently I was like looking at it, I was like, it's kind of interesting, was that like all the talent and like creatives, the animators, this is back in the day, so like there weren't really like female animators, it was like a bunch of white dudes, like young white dudes who were the creatives and animators. They all were of age that could get drafted, so they got drafted to World War II instead of animating. So Disney was pretty strapped for talent. So the films that they kind of churned out during this period, a lot of people like arguably are to a very much lesser quality.
They were propaganda.
Yeah, and they were also doing a lot of propaganda films to support the wartime effort and like sell bonds and support in like that way, which I think is really interesting, but also is just completely tonally different than like the golden era.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like the story of Captain America, the First Avenger, but with Donald Duck.
Disney. Yeah.
Dude, I don't know if you've seen some of those old animations. Have you?
I think I've seen like clips, but I haven't seen the full ones.
There's been ones where it's like Donald was like impersonating Hitler as
what?
Like a stage thing. Yeah, dude. And like,
do you know what that one is called?
I forget what it's called, but it was like Dictator Duck maybe or something like that. I feel like that's be along those lines. But dude, it was freaking. It was like, what the.
Yeah,
it's weird to think about because like you see that now as like a cartoon, and you're like, okay, that's disconnected. But when you find out the era that it was made, and you're like, oh, that was made like before Hitler like died and all that, you know? And you're just like, oh my god, like, ooh.
It's interesting, yeah. It's crazy, but yeah. So the U.S. entered World War II, I think like 1941, end of 1941, and then Bambi came out because it was already like in the pipeline, 1942, and then the wartime era started with Saludos Amigos in February 1943. This era included Saludos Amigos, the three Caballeros. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
the three Caballeros. Make Mine Music, Fun and Fancy Free, Melody Time, and then The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And I think it's just interesting, like none of these I like know as like classics. So it totally like there was definitely like a dip, at least in long-term classic viewing. Yeah. And I also don't think Disney like often wants to promote these wartime movies, you know?
No, because there's a different connotation to them and different purpose to them for that time. So yeah, there's no really reason to. I mean, it's archived a lot for like people like me who actually had like the animation education background.
Right.
So you said a couple of those. I'm like, yeah, no, that sounds familiar.
Some of them I know I've heard just because like I've come across them like looking up stuff, but I don't think if I was not in like film I would ever have heard of these.
Yeah.
I'm looking up The Adventures. Yeah, it's still like on Disney Plus, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And I think these might be some of the ones, and I know they even did this for Dumbo, but I think some of these might be some of the ones where they like heavily censor a lot of the stuff. on Disney Plus because a lot of it is a product of its time, unfortunately. But it's interesting. Like, it's interesting. That's also an interesting, like, very different debate about like censorship versus non-censorship. Like, I understand Disney Plus is. I think it would be interesting actually because Disney Plus is like for kids, but now they have like with all the Marvel Netflix stuff that came over, they introduced the new like adult kind of parental settings you can include. I think it'd be interesting to include the non-censored versions of these old, outdated films on that adult version, just for the simple purpose of like learning from our mistakes. Because like I truly am a believer that if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think just to see like, okay, this is bad. Like, I don't know if censorship.
I think it should be there. I agree. I think it should have access to both.
Yeah, censorship is just a whole other issue, a whole other podcast.
But, I don't know if that should be on Disney Plus, though. I think it maybe should be like an archive that's allocated, that like it's open source for people to have access to. But I don't like. You got to keep in mind too, business. But
yeah, Disney has to make money and stuff.
They're trying to as well. Not be canceled in today culture.
There's third ranking. There's like kids, regular Disney Plus, adult, and then like propaganda Disney Plus uncensored or something like that.
but dude, here's the thing though. There's censoring still going on with some of their animations that even that did like say like Lilo and Stitch.
Well, even like Strange World, I think or maybe it wasn't Strange World. There was like a debate over Strange World if they were going to censor the like queer relationship in other countries so that they could get a wider audience. I don't think they did. But I think that's interesting that it's still just a debate today.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, it's other people's cultures, you know, and that's kind of what sucks about it. Is like if they're.
I did not expect to get into censorship discussion on this Disney history, but it's interesting, and it's a part of it.
It changes over time, and it's something to where if your different cultures are your audience, right, or different people from different cultures are going to be your audience. So and that's a big part when it comes to any kind of media that you're making is like you have to make it for a specific audience, and if there's not a reach there, or if there's a disconnect, then they're not going to be happy. And really, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. Just make sure your audience and your consumer is happy.
Yeah, it's interesting in this day and age. All right, so that ends with the adventures of Ichiban and Mr. Toad. I personally don't know much about the Wartime Era myself, just because I don't think it was well documented because the focus was on World War II, and also like it was kind of like a low period and like not a lot of his memorable films. I want to look into it more.
I kind of want to find the Dictator Duck one just so we can watch it as a meme.
That might be the. I'm wondering if that's part of the Three Caballeros.
That could be the three,
because I'm looking at like this poster and I think Donald is on that.
Yeah.
So, and I think also the Three Caballeros, that is interesting because that one is, I believe, in Epcot. I think the like Aztec or like in Mexico, like the Aztec like temple, I think the ride is featured around the Three Caballeros. So they stick around there. I remember that. Like I've seen them on that ride somewhere in Epcot. So it's interesting that they're still around, but I don't see them really much anywhere else. But yeah. All right, next we've got the Silver Age, which is 1950 to 1967. So that starts with Cinderella and ends with The Jungle Book. So I'm going to run through everything that's included here. We've got Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, The Sword and the Stone, and Jungle Book. I think this is a good era of classics.
It definitely is. And you can see, too, that they're kind of experimenting a little bit more with styles of animation and, like, what kind of looks you're going for.
What do you mean? Which films are you talking about?
Take reference to, what was it, 101 Dalmatians? Like, the background designs are immensely different visually compared to, like, what other previous animations there were, right?
I think you probably know this, but I think, like, I was actually reading in that Disney War film, I think... Or maybe it was another video. I've been on like so many YouTube rabbit holes about this starting around this era of Disney. And I think 101 Dalmatians, there's actually a lot of controversy around it because I think this was around the time that computers were very, very early, like starting to get developed. And like this came out in 1961. And so they were trying to experiment to see if they could make any process easier. And they were always experimenting. Disney was always experimenting.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I admire about them, especially in the early days about trying to make things better with like this different cell animations or whatever. But, I think 101 Dalmatians was like the first one where they used like a new technique to color in all of the spots and the like shading of the dogs. Yep. And you can definitely see it. Like it looks distinctly different than the earlier films. And it's a lot of people, especially in inner Disney, and like I think Roy E. Disney maybe said he was the nephew of Roy O. Disney, and he's a big player later in the years. But I think he said that it looked a little like cheap because it didn't have like the artist touch to it. There was a lot of grain and like some moving roughness to it, which honestly kind of gives it a little bit of charm looking back. But like back then it was kind of seen as like dirty and trashy and like a different way of animating.
Again, it also depends on the perspective, right? Because as an artist or an animator, you're seeing it like that and you're understanding the process, and then you're saying it's cheap off because of that.
But as a consumer who doesn't know that, it's different and it might be cool to you.
It just looks different and it has different stylization. So yeah, exactly. So it's funny how that perspective can make people think and view things different ways.
But that process did like save them a ton of money, and I believe they did refine that and use it in like later films. But because they said like it would have been millions and millions of more dollars to just hand draw every single dot on every single dog. So it's cool that they were like doing that. I don't know. I like the innovation, that little tidbit about 101 Dalmatians.
When do we get into the multiplanar camera? Is that like right before the Renaissance? Or is that before?
The multiplanar? What do you mean? Like with the multi-cell like perspective? I think Pinocchio, they started doing that.
The multiplanar camera is when they have the vertical camera, like it's like literally the size of a whole room.
Yeah, I think that was really early they developed that. I thought it was Pinocchio.
I thought it was Bambi.
Either way, that's years ago. That's still the golden age. Bambi was in the golden age.
I know, but I'm just thinking about that. Like, I think that's important to
let me look this up, Daniel. History of Disney.
So for reference for our audience, right? The multicellular camera, you can think of it like this. You have a camera that's pretty much the size of.
It was started in 1937. Yeah, dude, that was the year Snow White came out. They started experimenting with that like right after Snow White or right during Snow White.
Interesting. So, and the way it works is to create a parallax effect, so that way you can have things like the background moving slower, and then like your foreground elements moving a little bit quicker, so you can create parallax to actually make things look like they're moving. It pretty much fakes camera moving in a scene with 2D elements, which is actually pretty powerful. And they use it a lot.
Oh, dude, I just found like a historical document or like some sort of history on the multiplanar camera. It was first used in the Old Mill. You know, that old, it's like an Old Mill short film that Disney did as like a test in 1937. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love this stuff, dude. All right. But yeah, so that was 1937, and like this era, the Cinderella Silver Age era started in 1950, so they were definitely using it by this point.
That. Well, still using it, but they're advancing even more.
Yeah. I think these are solid. Honestly, out of these, I think they might start dipping a little bit. Like I know 101 Dalmatians didn't do too hot. I think it's still considered like a classic. The Sword and the Stone, I feel like is talked about out of all of these, probably the least out of like Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, The Jungle Book. But I've heard decent things. I think it's a good film, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think this is a solid era. What are your thoughts on this era before we move on?
I think it is a solid era, but I also think it deems the Silver Age pretty well as a title.
You think it's still lesser than the Golden Era?
Yeah, lesser than Golden, definitely lesser than Renaissance.
Even Cinderella?
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, I agree with that. Cinderella is like arguably the peak of the Silver Age.
Yeah.
And not gonna lie,
I could see that.
I would have considered that. Well, that was the first one of the Silver Age, right?
Yes.
I would have considered that Golden Age.
Well, no, because it's time period, you know. Like
I know. I'm just saying
it's not like you can't. Yeah. I got you.
That's
like
what I'm saying.
If we're not looking at time, that's like the quality of like a Golden Age movie kind of thing. You're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, I understand. But no, this is broken up by like time, and I think
I totally get
you can see it like breaks up in time pretty well. But I would consider basically the options for Cinderella, since it's on the edge, were Wartime and Silver Age. It's definitely not Wartime. It's like a Silver. So yeah, I agree with their ranking there. But so the Jungle Book was the last one. Then we jump into the Bronze Age, which is 1970 to 1988, and it starts with the Aristocats, ends with Oliver and Company. And I will run through all of these, but I just want to mention this is where things get a little muddy and interesting, at least from a history standpoint, because 1967, I think the quality of the films like The Jungle Book was again like a good period, but also in 1966, I believe it was. Let me double check. Yeah, 1966, very end of 1966 was when Walt Disney died. So this next era, the Bronze Age, is the start of Disney without Walt Disney, which I think is a huge turning point in quality and just Disney figuring out what the heck to do in the direction of how to move forward, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. It's them like trying to figure out like what,
because he was like the leading creative force.
yeah, like what's going to be our direction and like how do we keep on moving forward?
Yeah. So they started the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age was the Aristocats, Robin Hood, the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the Rescuers, the Fox and the Hound, the Black Cauldron, the Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company, which I think is a decent, solid batch of films. Like, those are all ones I've heard about and I've seen a lot of them. I don't know if I've seen all of them, which is probably bad. I probably should go back and watch them. But I don't know if, like, I think some people would call them classics. I think people, like, in the general public might not consider them classics, you know?
Yeah. Jake, I'm an animation student, and I haven't seen all of them, so you're good.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. But yeah, out of those, Aristocats, Robin Hood, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, Fox and the Hound, Black Cauldron, Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company. What are some of your highlights?
Aristocats and Robin Hood and Winnie the Pooh, I think.
Winnie the Pooh, I was going to say. I think Winnie the Pooh is a classic.
Yeah, definitely. All the way. I forget
the
which
Ewan McGregor version, of course. I'm just kidding.
Oh, totally.
He's a time traveler.
Oh, honey.
Have you seen the General Grievous like edit of that?
No.
It's
What?
But you haven't seen that? It's like it's Ewan McGregor's Christopher Robin, and then like Pooh walks up to him behind the bench, and he's like, "Hello, Pooh," and then Pooh like steps out and like lightsabers ignite. He's like, "Poof, poof, poof, poof." General Kenobi. It's Winnie the Pooh holding like 4 lightsabers. It's so funny,
dude. That's so funny. I could see that. I could see that being like a Meat Canyon freaking animation, dude. That'd be so freaking
Anyways,
funny.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I think this is, I don't know, the Bronze Age. I think that's a very fitting title. It's like not great, but not bad. Like, third place is respectable out of like the Gold, Silver, Bronze Ages, you know?
Yeah. When it comes to the animation, though, weren't they also mimicking and taking some animation from previous projects? Like, I remember seeing like people compare like
Jungle Book,
Winnie the Pooh. Yeah.
Yeah, there was something where they like took. Yeah, I think again, this is one where like they were struggling financially with a lot of things. I think this was also around the time that Walt Disney World opened up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, it's interesting. I looked up a lot of the history on the CEOs themselves. So like after Walt, well, technically I don't think Walt was ever CEO. I think he was like president. But once he died, like Roy O. Disney, who was already CEO but kind of took on the responsibility that Walt had. Roy O. Disney, the brother that co-founded it, he was the first CEO and was CEO just for a few years, starting in the Bronze Age. He retired right after Walt Disney World was finalized and opened in 1971, and then he actually died 2 months later. Damn. And then after that, Don Tatum was the CEO from 1971 to 1976. He was the first non-Disney family member to be CEO, and he helped a lot with the Epcot construction, and then starting Disney's goals with helping Disney's goals with the construction of Tokyo Disneyland, or Disney World, whatever it's called. Then E. Carden Walker started as CEO of 1976 to 1989. I think it's interesting because he actually started Disney in the mailroom back in the 30s. Then he was drafted to World War II, then came back after World War II, worked up in the ranks of Disney, and eventually became Disney, the CEO, which is just crazy. He also founded Disney Channel, so thanks for that, Card Walker. So it's just crazy. Also, I'm just listing all these off. These are all still within the Bronze Age. So I think Disney like ran through a lot of CEOs and was kind of trying to find their footing. Like, what the heck's going on at this point?
Yeah.
Then Ron Miller became the CEO, who was Walt Disney's son-in-law, which is interesting. This is where the book started that I've been listening to. So I'm like a little familiar on this. But Ron Miller was apparently like a football player at USC. Like, there's a school that's like 20 minutes from me. And then he met Walt Disney's daughter on a blind date at USC in college. So honestly, that's a really important blind date. That led to him becoming CEO of Disney. Like, wow, that's a lot of pressure.
That's freaking crazy, dude.
Yeah, but yeah, so he played football at USC. And then Walt Disney, I think, went to like 2 of Ron Miller's games when he was in college and was like a little nervous and like upset and didn't want Ron Miller to like be playing football because he didn't want him to get hurt and then not be able to take care of his daughter. So he was like, well, hey, why don't you work for me at Disney instead? And that's how Ron Miller got started at Disney, because Walt Disney didn't want him to get hurt. And then eventually became CEO like years later after Walt's death and everything. So I think that's just a crazy way to become CEO.
Yeah. There's also a weird thing about it too. I'm like, get hurt. Like, people get hurt in football, but then I'm also thinking back to like that time where they had like less like equipment and all that. I mean,
now it's bad still, but like back then, yeah. But yeah, because he started out as a football player, though, a lot of people in Hollywood just saw him as like a dumb jock. So he wasn't really treated with the most respect. So he was CEO from 1983 to 1984. And he actually created, what's interesting, is a subdivision of Disney called Touchstone Label, which is still around today, I'm pretty sure, which is like basically a subdivision of Disney, but without the Disney brand attached to it. And it's where Disney would create other films, like more adult, non-G rated kids films. So that, because a lot of people in Disney were like, didn't want to expand into like more PG films back in the day, because Disney had this brand of like kid energy associated with it, but they felt like they were losing out a lot of money. So Ron Miller's solution and his like regiment, they created a whole new division called Touchstone Pictures, or the Touchstone label, and they created all of their like live action films that were meant for a more adult audience under this label, so without attached to Disney, so that it didn't tarnish the brand. And I think that's a really genius move, honestly.
No, it really is smart. It's like, hey, I understand what our appeal is. So if you want to change our audience here, we can also just change up where we're coming from and then go from there.
Yeah, Touchstone Pictures, I believe, is still around. Yeah, founded in 1984 by Ron Miller. I wonder what films they've done recently, but I think they've done like a lot of good films. They did Nightmare Before Christmas. They just did The Light Between Oceans in 2010, so, or 2016, I think. So that maybe they're not around. I don't know. I'm gonna look up Touchstone films ranked. They did. Is there anything? They did Lincoln in 2012.
Oh,
Who they did? They also did Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So yeah, some good films out of this venture. Oh, they did The Help. Oh my gosh. Dead Poet Society. Yeah, that's a good one. The Prestige. I need to watch that still. Okay, anyways. Yeah, so I'm just saying, in this whole era when everything was like, it was just a weird era of a lot of CEO changes, so it makes sense that maybe the films suffered a little bit in quality. But because of that, Roy E. Disney, the guy I mentioned earlier, who is Roy O. Disney's son and Walt Disney's nephew, kind of was getting upset that he felt like the Disney brand was not living up to the magic that it was set out, like originally was back in the day. And so he started a Save Disney campaign and actually pretty much like did a takeover and overthrew Ron Miller as the CEO and replaced him with Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, who Michael Eisner was the CEO during the Disney Renaissance, which is our next era. And then Frank Wells was the president at that time. They were kind of like running the company for a while. And this is like really interesting. But yeah, so I think Michael Eisner kind of came in towards the end of the Bronze Age. I think, 1984 was when I think Michael Eisner came in. Then it took a few years for them to kind of get out of that slump. And the Disney Renaissance started in 1989 when The Little Mermaid came out. And then the Disney Renaissance is the Disney Renaissance, dude. From Little Mermaid to Tarzan. We've got Little Mermaid, Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. Arguably, I mean, it's tough because these were the films I grew up on. So these, to me, are like classics, you know?
Yes, these definitely, I mean, obviously, because we're the same age, I totally agree.
Yeah.
But they also hold their own comparatively to the Golden Age.
100%.
Well.
I mean, I think the technology is better at this point, but the stories, I think this was interesting because I think they figured out a formula for like bringing Broadway to Disney. Like they brought in, I think we talked about that in our TTTT a couple weeks ago, like that one composer who like were kind of creating Broadway musicals out of these animated films. I know Disney films in the past had music, but this one was like more of a grander production, I feel like.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Not just like one-off, like solo, like we're fairies and we're in the woods and we're fairies. That's Sleeping Beauty for those who don't know. But yeah, dude, this was a good time. It was interesting though. Not everything wasn't great. That's what the main point of this book I'm listening to, this audiobook, Disney Wars. It's about the Michael Eisner regime. And basically what happened was like Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, they were the two running the company. They used to work at Paramount Pictures years before, and they had kind of taken Paramount out of like a lump and brought them to like be the top studio, I believe, for a while.
Yeah.
And then so Roy E. Disney, like I said, he overthrew like Ron Miller and helped bring in Michael Eisner and Frank Wells as the heads of Disney at this time for the Renaissance. Then Michael Eisner brought in Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is a very interesting player in the story. But Jeffrey Katzenberg worked under Michael Eisner for like years at Paramount as like his, I don't know, like assistant, like number 2 kind of thing. But he was like a grinder, go-getter, like would do anything for Eisner. He was often, literally people referred to him as a golden retriever. Like he had so much energy and was just willing to do everything and anything because he knew Eisner was going to succeed and he wanted to like be there with him and hopefully use that as a chance to like excel his career as well. So Jeffrey Katzenberg was brought in to run the film division of Disney, and specifically was working in animation and worked alongside with Roy E. Disney. So they were kind of, it's weird, they were kind of like partners-ish, I guess, for a while. It's a little confusing, a little cloudy. Things were going well for a while. Like they had Little Mermaid, the Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and then I think Lion King was actually Jeffrey Katzenberg's idea. And so he kind of treated it as like his baby, and things were going well. Katzenberg was a little aggressive throughout this whole process, and as he was getting more successful, he was getting a little more aggressive and like wanted more. But also things weren't being met in his contract, because basically in his contract, I don't mean to like get too much into this, I think it's really interesting, but in Katzenberg's contract, like he was promised like 2% of all gross profits above $100 million for like films that he helped produce. And that was like a thing that was unheard of at the time. They were like, this will never pay out. But then the Disney Renaissance like took off, and so much so that like he was owed like $100 million or something like that, but he wasn't like getting it. So there was a little bit of tension there with that, which I totally understand. And then Katzenberg again wanted like a lot. He wanted more and more, and he wanted to be promised. He wanted to be Eisner's number 2 if anything were ever to happen to Wells, or Wells would retire, because Wells was a little older and had been talking about wanting to retire and either get into politics or just like climb mountains, because he was like very big into outdoor activities. And so Katzenberg wanted that assurance. And Eisner, it's a kind of a whole he said, she said, whatever thing. Eisner there's accounts that he like hinted at or alluded to, maybe said that, yes, Katzenberg you'll be my number 2 if anything ever happens to Wells, thinking nothing would happen. And then Katzenberg was like, okay, great, that's some good assurance for me. Unfortunately, then in 1994, Frank Wells did actually die. Like he was in a helicopter accident because he was like a big outdoorsy person. He passed away. Do you know this story? Am I just like...
You are kind of just,
Oh, I'm sorry. I like talking about it because I'm just learning about it.
But it's cool to hear again. Yeah, to refresh it, and I think it's also cool for the audience to hear too.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your patience with this.
Yeah,
but yeah, so Frank Wells then passed away, and in like a helicopter accident, and Katzenberg then was like, okay, well, I'm gonna be number 2, and he kind of waited for like a little bit of time. Like he basically waited like a weekend before saying anything, and while Eisner was figuring everything out, and then Eisner kind of just never talked to Katzenberg about it, and then like issued a press release saying that Eisner himself was just going to take up the responsibility of Frank Wells for now. So he was just going to be the sole person at the top. Then kind of went to like a dinner with Katzenberg and pretended like nothing was wrong. And Katzenberg kind of like flipped and was like, yo, like you promised me that I was going to be president. Like, and I'm trying to be like whatever, like I want to respect everything at this time, but like you did promise me, like is this ever going to happen, or do I not have a future here? Like have I hit the ceiling? And Eisner kind of had already been having tension with Katzenberg because of how aggressive he was with animation and just like in general about trying to go get it and get everything. Like there's a lot more to it that I'm simplifying, but Eisner was like, what do you mean? Like just give us some time. Like Frank just passed away, like whatever, like I never promised you anything. And Katzenberg was like, whoa, like you actually did. And so there was a divide that happened there, and that's about to the point I'm in the book. But I eventually do know then that there was a falling out between the two of them. Katzenberg left Disney and then went on to form DreamWorks to spite Disney, which is why we got Ants, like we were talking about, because it was kind of like a big FU to Disney because they were working on A Bug's Life, so they were trying to undermine that. How we also got Shrek, because it's like just basically spitting in the face of all the Disney fairy tale tropes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the divide came from that led to those films. So I just find that whole story fascinating. But at this time, though, we were going through the Disney Renaissance, which looks great from the outside, but when you peel back the layers of the executives, maybe wasn't so great from the inside, which I think is interesting.
Peel back the layers like Shrek.
Oh, it all comes back. Yeah.
But yeah, no, there definitely is a lot of interesting history there.
Yeah, sorry, I know I just talked
think
forever, but
I
hope
know
I
you
did a
did, but
decent
you
job
capped it very well. That
recounting
was
it.
actually, I can say that was a very good recounting.
That was the Disney Renaissance, like 1999, and then things kind of fell off in the turn of the century with 2000 to 2009, which is called the post-Renaissance era, which started with Fantasia 2000 and it goes all the way through The Princess and the Frog. So that includes Fantasia 2000, which is considered like a failure. Dinosaur, also considered a failure. Your favorite, The Emperor's New Groove.
Dude, that should be in the Renaissance, honestly. That's
again,
Renaissance
I understand
quality,
what you're saying,
dude.
like quality wise, because
but I understand
like
the timing.
with the time
it
period,
doesn't make sense. No,
and also it like I think at the time like it didn't do as well as Disney would have wanted to. But also that's not. I don't think it's a fault of the movie. I think it's a fault of Fantasia and Dinosaur having tanked. And also at this point, we're getting DreamWorks now, and we're getting competition. So it's pulling like Disney's starting to not have a monopoly on everything, you know, which I think is another huge factor. Like at this, especially back in the Renaissance, like Pixar was starting, so we're starting to get other animation studios. So Disney's kind of having to up their game, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, so then we've got Atlantis, The Lost Empire. I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, dude, yeah. You think you have?
I haven't seen that. I don't think.
That's another classic, dude.
All right.
Yes, you need to see that. For the story, the world building, the mix of the animation, because that was one of the ones where they started using a lot of 3D elements for like specific assets, which is pretty cool. Yeah, dude, that was killer.
Yeah. Okay. We've also got next Lilo and Stitch. I love this one. This might be one of my favorites from this period. Treasure Planet, which I also have not seen yet. I know. I need to see it.
It has its own cult following because some people hate on it a lot. Other
I have
people
heard
are like,
that.
I love it. I personally love it for like the world building and all that stuff. That's where I touches my soul.
Yeah.
People could suck it.
Okay. Next we got Brother Bear. I like Brother Bear a lot. I know he gets mixed reviews. We've got Home on the Range. We've got Chicken Little. Another one I like. I like the soundtrack. Remember Bops from Flops? That's that one.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Meet the Robinsons, which I think is Disney's first 3D animated fully. Oh no, maybe Home on the Range is.
I'm pretty sure Home on the Range would be.
Yeah,
Meet the Robinsons was also pretty good.
That's kind of all over the place. Like I think I loved it as a kid, then I watched it again later, and I was like, "This is a weird movie."
Yeah, no, it definitely was a weird movie. Going back and watching it, but like I feel like the way that they had the villain arc was good.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I do remember. The villain I think was good because it was the kid. Spoilers: the kid that then like grew up and like time travel and everything, right?
Yeah.
Spoilers for this 15-year-old movie. Then we've got Bolt. And then wrapping up with The Princess and the Frog, which really? I feel like there could be an argument that could be the next era, but I understand why they made the cutoff to the next era, which we'll talk about. But yeah, so that is the post-Renaissance era, 2000 2009. I think that's a good string of movies. This is also the time where we're like children, so it's interesting seeing a lot of the ones pop up that I remember watching now as a kid. So I'm starting to get into nostalgia territory and need to like separate that from like, is this actually a good movie kind of thing?
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. But at the same time too, there is like some writing that was just really well done.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I like Emperor's New Groove. Like again, the nostalgia is there, but just that away from it, like this sarcastic type of writing in that was peak.
Yeah.
Very much peak.
I think a lot of these are not classics in the way the old Disney movies were that we were talking about as like classics, which I think was the issue because at this point I think Bob Iger took over as CEO about halfway through this era in 2005, and a big thing he says in his memoir that I read is that the reason he knew we needed to change something with animation was because he went to like a parade in Disney and realized that there were no characters from the last 10 years that were Disney characters like in this parade. Like all the characters from the were like the classics like Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, The Little Mermaid, The Lion King creatures, whatever. And then anything after like that was like Pixar characters like Woody and Buzz, Monsters Inc., The Incredibles, all those films that had come out. And that moment he said he realized like, okay, these Pixar guys, they know what they're doing. And that's what kind of got the gears turning for him for the Pixar acquisition, and that ultimately led to the Pixar acquisition, which led to him taking John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, who were the heads of Pixar, and having them run both Pixar and coming in and replacing the management at Disney Animation and having them run both, which I think Princess and the Frog was the first film that was like fully produced by them that came out, and then Tangled, which was next and started the revival period, which is the last period currently that we're technically in. It could be argued that we're in a new period now, but right now the revival period, 2010 to present, is what we're in. And that's when like the new management happened and we started getting a lot of what I would consider, again, more classics like Tangled, Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana, those kind of films that I think were definitely an uptick in quality from Disney Animation in my mind. What are your thoughts on the revival?
And it's also because in the revival, we were seeing the transition largely into 3D.
Yeah.
And using that technology to leverage the storytelling in a much different way. And it's very interesting to see, too, because not only did it make things easier on animators in some aspects, but also made more challenges as you're
they had to learn,
pushing into
kind
that.
Of unlearn and relearn a lot of techniques. It's interesting that like that's how long it took Disney to like jump into that foray, that new age. Like Disney I think was known for innovating, but like they didn't really like go all in with 3D animation until really Tangled was like I said, like the start of like, okay, they were like, they found the formula, even though that was 2010. Toy Story was the first 3D animated movie, 1995. So 15 years later, it took them to kind of like really commit. And they only really committed once Bob Iger brought in the Pixar CEO, like guys who were already fully committed, you know?
What year did you say Tangled was?
2010.
When was Monsters, Inc. University?
Monsters University? There's no Monsters, Inc. University.
Whatever.
I think 2013. Yeah, 2013.
Really? That's interesting. And the reason why I'm bringing that comparison up is I'm thinking of OpenGL. Because that means in Tangled that all the shadows and lights...
Oh, shoot. We're like hand
done.
Oh my gosh, that's impressive.
Like think of like the lantern scene with like the reflection of the waves.
That's why I think Disney has the artistry and like that classic understanding and the experience. So maybe that helped them a bit. I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But that's a very interesting point, yeah. But yeah, sorry, just to run through all of the films that are technically in this revival period. We've got Tangled, like I said, then Winnie the Pooh, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana, Wreck-It Ralph 2, like Ralph Breaks the Internet, Frozen 2, Raya and the Last Dragon, and Kanto and Strange World. And I think it's interesting. I think after Moana, there's like a cutoff because then we've got Wreck-It Ralph 2, Frozen 2, Raya and the Last Dragon, and Kanto and Strange World. I think Encanto's good out of all of those, but besides that, those other four, I think are not great and could argue you're in like another decline period kind of thing.
I agree with that. It's something to where, like, I mean, we've been talking about this before on the podcast. Like, there needs to be a change for the media again, and I'm happy we're seeing that again, like with Spider-Verse. Now with TMNT, dude, I'm so excited for the TMNT Mutant Mayhem.
Yes, dude.
Like pushing this style to be this blend between 2D and 3D. Really, again, to push the storytelling in a way that can feel more natural, but also has its own unique style to it.
Yeah. Do you think Disney will ever get back and get to their peak? Like, will innovate again? I feel like they've really kind of lackluster.
Only
not
if
innovated.
They are able to take more risk. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They're in the formulaic spot right now. It's like, okay, this is working numbers wise, but again, if we get to a point where they get to such a decline that the numbers aren't there, then they need to then innovate in order to create and cause that change, you know?
I agree. I think that Disney, just looking at all of these trends, it seems like they go up for a while, then they kind of stagnate, or like, life is good, and then something else comes along that's like, okay, now they're old news, and then it looks like they innovate again, and like kind of do great, then kind of fall down. Like I'm thinking like the Wartime Era was like not really their fault, but then like the Silver Age, and then they kind of dipped in the Bronze Age.
No, the Wartime Era was definitely their fault.
Disney called World War II. You heard it here first. No, I'm just kidding. Then like you innovate again, and like in the Renaissance, and they kind of dip down. Then they brought in Pixar and innovated again for at least a little while in the revival, and then I think they are kind of dipping again with these recent films. I think Disney is like such a big company that it's hard to propose new ideas within like that organization and like break away from the old, but they've shown before that they have the ability to do that, so I don't think it's out of the question that they could do it again. I think it's going to be tough though. No,
I totally agree, but it's not even that. It's not the idea generation. I feel like that's technically one of the easy parts. I'm not talking about idea generation. I'm talking about like accepting new technology and innovating in that sense, the artistry side of things. Okay. Yeah. No, that's what I was going to say. And also just like harnessing a good story out. I feel like their stories haven't been too great. Besides Encanto, I liked Encanto recently. Yeah. All right. I want to ask you what era of Disney animation is your favorite. I want to ask you to rank all the different eras of Disney animation. Tough.
I have mine, but we can go from worst to best again if possible.
From worst to best. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm
Do you want me to run through them all again?
Bronze is going to be the worst, I think, because there was the least
the worst
number of like hits in that time. You know, like there's some good things that came out of the Bronze Era, but it wasn't like.
Whoa!
peak.
Really?
Yeah. Why? Where do you have bronze? Wait. Let me guess. You're putting the post.
No.
Not post. It's a post Renaissance one. Wasn't one the renewal?
The revival?
Revival. Whatever.
I think Revival has some great ones in the early days.
I'm confused about why
I have the Wartime at my bottom.
Oh yeah, I don't even know why I was. Yeah. Good
You
point.
know?
Very good point. Nah, dude, Dictator Duck all the way. Wartime's at the bottom. Sorry, I totally blanked on that. That's the point. Like I didn't even like process that. Like I wasn't even including that. Because I don't see it as like media in the same sense.
It's like not an era for you. You kind of thinking.
No, because there's a different purpose behind it, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. So not for all of it, but in a lot of cases. Then I would say bronze. Name me the ones in the Silver Age again, so I can break them up.
The Silver Age has Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, I think. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone, Jungle Book.
I'm gonna say
I think Silver Age is really good.
Renewal. It would then be
Revival.
It's bad. I just don't. The only good one that came out of that in my.
We have very different lists.
Would probably be like Tangled. After that, silver, gold, and then it's a fight between Renaissance and post-Renaissance.
Interesting. I have a very different list than you.
Okay.
So at the very bottom, I have the Wartime Era because like I don't think I've seen like any of these all the way through, which makes sense. Like everyone was drafted to the war and was like doing propaganda animation, so it's not again like nothing substantial or significant in my mind, at least.
Dictator Duck all the way.
Yeah. It's also a small selection, only like 6 films. The next after that, I have the Bronze Era. They're not like the worst films. There's definitely some good ones in there. I just think everything else is better and more memorable to me.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This might be a shock. I have the Golden Age next as my third from the bottom.
I think I know why your list is different. It's because you don't have a connection to those same films because they're from a different era. And I'm not sure if you spent so much time watching them.
Yeah, they're like really they're older films. It's been literally like 100 years for some of them almost, and like they're great films. It's also again not a huge selection. Like there's Snow White, there's Bambi. Again, very great films, but I think they're from a different time, and I relate to these other films better because I grew up in the different time. You know. In a different time.
Let me ask you this. Cinderella or Wreck-It Ralph 2?
Cinderella. Well, Cinderella's not in the Golden Age, so I'm good.
I know. I'm just preparing for your next pick.
The next pick I have is post-Renaissance, actually. So, like the 2000s. Because I think what happened... and this is what happened with a lot of kids. I think you watched a lot of the Disney movies like growing up from like the early 2000s. I think because Disney had competition, and this happened a lot, which is what led to Bob Iger to like buy Pixar. I think parents, they took a poll, and like a lot of parents from the early 2000s, when they were asked to choose between Pixar and Disney as like what their family perceived as more family friendly, which way they would gravitate towards, a lot of parents chose Pixar. And I think my family was probably even subconsciously one of those families that just gravitated towards Pixar. Like I remember a lot of those early 2000 Pixar movies way more than the early 2000 Disney movies. So like I don't remember like a lot of them. I think some of them are great. Again, Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch, all that stuff. But there's a lot in there that I haven't even seen or like resonate with me too closely. So that's my reasoning for that.
So your argument is ignorance. Got it.
Part of it, but also I just think that's part of it. Yeah, so post-Renaissance, like the 2000s and everything.
That's a rip.
Bro, I told you we're gonna have different lists. It's okay that we have different opinions.
Keep on going.
Next, I have the Revival after that. Okay, dude. Like,
I'm sorry.
But
you go.
Specifically,
I keep on.
It's very specifically the first part of the revival. I am not a huge fan of the second part of the revival, but like I think it's really just awesome. And I also think I like the story behind how the revival happened with like Ed Catmull and John Lasseter coming in and like reviving Disney animation. And I think these two are also very like this last era and this are very close. Like but I think Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph are very strong films. Big Hero 6 I like, Moana, Zootopia, even like Frozen. I think it was overhyped for the time, like when it came out, which brings it down is a little annoying.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Big Hero 6.
But I think just it's a solid film. So I do have to give the revival that spot. And then after that, I have the Silver Age of Disney actually as my number 2. Just because I think these are classic films and are just really good, have stood the test of time with generations and me. And the fact that they've done that more so than like post-Renaissance, for example, I think they deserve to be higher in this list, like Peter Pan, freaking Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Lady and the Tramp, Jungle Book, all those ones. And then finally, I think this has to be my top. Freaking The Renaissance, man, has amazing films. It's called The Renaissance for a reason, and it's earned that reason. With like Little Mermaid was my first crush ever, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, all of those, Hercules, like that is such a solid era of Disney, like Disney's heyday.
See a girl, you're just like, she's not half fish.
Yeah.
No.
Yep. That's my kink. Just kidding. But yeah, so
it's a solid list. I can respect it to a degree.
That is a brief history of Disney animation. Whew. I enjoy that. I apologize. I think I was talking a lot that episode, Daniel.
You were. You're kind of just you reminded me of my one professor from college. As if I was like in a lecture, so it did bring back some memories of that.
I'm sorry. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable.
Well, no, it was one of the classes I liked, dude. So it was
okay,
good.
That's good. Yeah. I'm a teacher now on Disney.
Well, yeah. Actually, no, I can say that if I'm a TA and a student alumni mentor, I could say that you are definitely
the audience,
a teacher.
Are our students? There's a quiz, pop quiz now. What years were the Disney Renaissance?
What color's my underwear?
No. All right, that was everything I had. Anything else you wanted to add about the brief history of Disney and?
No, I think that covered it pretty well.
We also, just so you guys know, we talked about, I mean, obviously, but we talked about just specifically Disney, the films that were under the Disney animation umbrella. So, I mean, there's a lot more films. Like we said, we mentioned Touchstone Pictures did like live action features.
Who did the Rocketeer?
Rocketeer, I think that might have been another Disney Rocketeer studio.
It's owned by Disney. It's on Disney Plus.
Because Disney basically created two like sub branches to do like more adult films. They did Touchstone Pictures and I think like Hollywood Pictures.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that was Touchstone as well. It says Touchstone.
Okay.
Distributed by Walt Disney Pictures, Walt Disney Studios, Motion Pictures, and then Touchstone.
It's a smart way to do it, so you don't tarnish the Disney brand.
Yeah.
But you still get the money.
For those of you that know the Rocketeer, you are gods. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, for the comments, please like leave a comment what you think what your opinion is on the best Disney like era, or like maybe some of your favorite Disney films were like, I don't know, what era do you think is like good? Do you agree with our list, disagree? Like should the post Renaissance be as low as I put it kind of thing? Early 2000s.
I think you trashed on it, and I feel like Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch just on their own bring that era up.
I think those are two solid ones, and Brother Bear. And Chicken Little, like I love those.
Yes.
But I just think the other ones I slightly like more, which is okay. What other ones? I told you, bro. I think.
No, I thought you were gonna say what other one. I thought you were gonna say the other ones in that era brought it down. And I was like, no, they don't really. I mean, kind of, but like, eh.
I think Home on the Range, Meet the Robinsons aren't like great. Dinosaur and Fantasia 2000, Daniel, those bring them down a lot. You cannot argue with me there. Yeah. That's right, Daniel. Take a smell of that big old dinosaur crap.
Okay.
All right, anyways, you ready to jump into the next segment?
Yeah, what we got?
So, I mean, we can either do quirky queries, TTT, or to draft, but I have nothing prepared. Do you have anything prepared or anything?
TTT.
You have one?
Kind of. So, this is more kind of like a latest news thing because of AI. Because everybody's been going off about AI.
Okay, also, just so you know, this will be going out, like, in a month. like 3 weeks, so this might be old news at this point.
Well, you never know. This is like edge new. It's like edging new.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, all the stuff going on with AI, and now we have like Midjourney like 5 or Dolly 5, whatever the fuck it was, all that. Well, that's pretty cool and all, but did you know that they're doing organic intelligence now?
No. What do you mean?
So what they're doing is they've been using stem cell research to pretty much create things called organoids, which are like little cellular based machines pretty much that they configure to have like a neuron type matrix pretty much, and they're using it to train it to do things that AI does. So they're calling it OI, not AI. So it's like organic intelligence, and they already have it doing things like playing Pong.
They're creating life.
Well, no, it brings in the question like it's not conscious, but like it's like how efficient can you be? Because think of it like this, right? There's this computer. This is an analogy that all of the news reports keep on bringing up. There's this computer that they finally made a couple of years ago that's like matches the potential of a human brain, given like its processing, storage, and speed. But that's like a whole warehouse, dude. But something like this, think about the energy uses of that. It's like how low energy like humans take, right? Compared to like a whole warehouse.
That's
like,
interesting.
Imagine that with a scale of AI and now OI working together to like make organic machines.
Yeah.
That's gonna be like crazy. So
yeah, dude.
That's where things are going, and it's gonna be really weird. It's gonna be really
interesting.
Weird.
Cool. All right, are you ready to jump into the next segment, patron shoutouts?
Yeah, hit me with them.
Cue the stars music. Boost, got patron Lori, Frank, Vic, Lisa, Evan, Tony. Thank you so much for pledging the tier. You see the shout. If you like the supporters over on Patreon, like it's down in the description. You get the audio episode early, special benefits, cool works, all that jazz and more. Thank you sincerely to our patron supporters. We really do appreciate you. Are you ready for cool comments?
Yeah, what we got this time?
I do not have one prepared because we recorded very recently. So on our, this was actually from a few weeks ago, but we're recording it right after we posted our Shazam 2 review. Josh McIntyre commented, I would like to, no, this is actually a good comment. Josh McIntyre commented, I would like to formally thank the both of you for going through the painful task of watching this movie so I don't have to. Love the episode. So thank you, Josh. That made me laugh, and obviously just made Daniel laugh too.
Oh my god.
You're welcome.
No, that makes me feel better, dude.
Speaking of Moana, what can I say except you're welcome?
You're welcome. But dude, no, I forget if you mentioned it on the podcast, but I know we talked to the boys about it the one time where, like, after the movie, I called you up. Like, the movie finished, I'm still in my seat.
We did talk about it last on the podcast, but it's been a few weeks. God. But yeah, you called. It was so funny. You called me. You were like,
I'm like, do I need to stay for the credits?
But there was like so much more anger in your voice. You're like, do I like? You call me. They didn't even like say. I was like, hey. You're like, do I have to stay for the post credits? And I was like, what? And I was like, you're like, do I have to stay? Like,
are there post credits?
You said, are there post credits? And I was like, yes. And you're like, do I have to stay for them? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, we have a podcast where we talk about that stuff. Like, I would prefer if you did. You're like, okay. And I was like, about to say, like, I mean, if you need to go, and then you just hung up, and I was like, okay.
Because they're resetting everything anyway, so I'm like, what's the point? So, yeah. It was a movie, as we keep on saying. It was a movie.
I think there are decent elements to it, but, like, I will never go back and watch it again.
It was a movie.
Yes. All right. I don't know what we're doing next week. I think this might be towards the end of when I was, like, getting ahead for my friend to come out, so we might be doing something different when this comes out, so I don't want to make any promises. I will talk to you later. Or not, not you.
What? Are you getting off the Discord?
Wait, do you want to do the introduction?
Yeah, tell me when.
When?
Oh my god, you gotta keep that in now. We just got done talking about what we want to talk about, now we're done.
Thank you so much for listening. I actually just checked the calendar. I think either next week or the following is like the last Mandalorian episode, so I figured we could do like a Mandalorian season 3 review.
Oh yeah, dude, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, so it's still coming out when we're recording this, but this should be done soon when this has been posted. So subscribe for that. Keep an eye out for that. We'll be back next time. Goodbye.